Okay, I am going to crack on now with the first section of our morning. We've done some online participation already, which is great, which kind of sets the tone. But the next 4 slides are me going to share with you to introduce you to CfEM Action Research 2021-22. And here we are. Okay, so let's start with what we're trying to do. And I'm going to encourage you to keep these in your heads all the way along. Improve learner progress and ultimately attainment. So in what you're doing, we're calling it, can you please keep a clear line of sight towards that ultimate aim of the whole Action Research and indeed CfEM program throughout the entire year. Improve learner progress, that might be within grade, obviously, and ultimately attainment. Find solutions to problems in your college or network. It might be, the problem might be a kind of niggle or a perennial problem, or something that you think just could be better. In Action Research, the phrase, what could be better, is a really useful one. And routinely share lessons learned in and across your CfEMs. So normally Action Research is quite small scale, doesn't often do this breaking out of your own Action Research setting for wider lessons for the whole country, but DFE has tasked us with that and funded us to do so. And it's wonderful, you know, CfEM Live and other times in the year to see lessons learned. Bigger emphasis than last year. If you were involved in last year, there's going to be a bigger emphasis on sharing and learning and implementing lessons across CfEM as well. So 3 big aims. A little bit of theory. What sort of research are we doing? I think this is important, especially as most people have got a maths background and a certain way of looking at the world. Scientific or normal research takes a normative or positivist philosophy, if you like, and says, oh, something has to be, you know, absolutely proved to be true. And that's the green arrow pointing up. On the other hand, there is research and investigation that's more along the purple arrow. It's much more subjective, it's anecdotal, circumstantial. There are multiple truths in the world. And what we're doing is probably something in the middle, something where we've got some balance of those. And remember, I think most people who were with me last week or have done Action Research before, we take multiple evidence sources, multiple data sources, and look at those and triangulate or compare and contrast those. So we're looking for things like patterns and relationships and explanation. We're looking for influences, but we're acknowledging that FE, anti-education, is complex. It's not always rational. And there are multiple variables that come to bear simultaneously and in different ways on anything. So it's tricky. It's tricky what we're doing, but it's you know, that sort of situates Action Research, if you like, in a spectrum of ways of thinking about research. Again, just right back to basics. Action means your daily practice. And when I mean practice, it's just everything that you do, the way you talk to people, the resource you use, the pedagogy or approach. And this could be for teachers or support staff or anybody. Research, definition, systematic investigation of a specific topic to discover new information or understand things better. Now, when I say new information, new to you. Doesn't have to be new to the world, someone else might have already found that out or found out it worked. New to you, and blended together, that's action research. Action is about practice, so it's almost like practice, reflect on it. How well has it gone? What could I do differently? Get some ideas together, try something out in practice, go back, tweak it again, think about it, talk to colleagues, go back, try it again. So the distinction between action and research is narrowed. Action research cycles. So cycles are a really useful and tangible way of thinking about action research. If you like diagrams, you might like cycles. There are action researchers out there who think that cycles are sort of restricting people and a bit sort of, you have to follow A, B, C, D. But if you're starting off in action research, or you just got a year or two under your belt, I would recommend starting with cycles. I think they're really useful. So observe, reflect. So observe your own practice or what's happening here, an honest, cold-hearted look at what's happening. Reflect, so how did that go? What worked well, what didn't? Act, where you can plan together. That's a different way of using the word act. Evaluate, so you could collect data there. And modify, well, you're going to make some conclusions. What are you going to do differently as a result? And you're either going to try the same thing again with the same cohort if it worked, or move off in a different direction. You can investigate something else, something related or something new if you want to. I would really encourage you to find a diagram on a search engine. If you just type in action research cycles and then click images, you'll come up with lots of choices. Here's one. This happens to be from McNiff and Whitehead, but there are lots of others. Find one that kind of speaks to you. Find one that you can explain to other people. The terms they use, like observe, reflect, act, are slightly different on different diagrams. Okay, but the really important thing is here, each circle could be small, could be a couple of weeks, could be big, could involve just one person, could involve multiple people. And it's iterative. One cycle leads to the next, So a really fundamental concept in action research is the iterative nature of this. And then my second bullet point there in red is emphasizing how you can think of where traditional research of literature review, or forming your research question, literature review, collecting data, analyzing data, writing it up, kind of fits in to these cycles as well. That's a useful exercise to do, because we are doing kind of hybrid. We're kind of doing both. We're using some traditional research approaches within an action research cycle method, if you like. Okay, so those were my 4 introductory slides to action research itself. Now, some of you were really itching to get into the actual sort of planning and organizing. So we thought we would share this with you. It is just an example of a first action research sort of beginnings of a timetable. I've seen on Slack already, some of you are Gantt charting or thinking and sharing, thank you, a Gantt chart for the whole sort of project as well, which is great. But this document, and I'll give you time to look through it in a moment. This document, it's available as a resource on the landing page for this session. is what you could be thinking along the lines of for the action research cycles. Then, if you're thinking about doing a timeline, you can access the Train the Trainer timeline, which is on the Padlet, and see how that fits in. And of course, you've got your own FE College or colleges year with times where you'd want to avoid or times where you can work together to lay over the top of that as well. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just review this document. The wiggly lines are showing how the end of cycle 1 iteratively flows into cycle 2, which flows into cycle 3. Joss, do you want to come in there, or should we just give people a quiet moment?
I think let's have a nosy, because there's quite a lot in here.
Right. Can you take a couple of minutes just to digest this example document?
And perhaps any questions that come up, just pop in chat. I know Cassandra takes them, yeah. Okay.
So questions such as what does so-and-so mean is absolutely fine. I'd love some feedback on this, people. So if you want to unmute yourself and come in, we're doing participation in multiple ways. There's Jamboard, Google Docs, chat, just unmute. Your participation is essential.
I really like the look of this. It looks nice and logical to me. And
Who's that speaking? Sorry, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's Fiona Dixon.
Hello, Fiona from the Lakes.
Hi, apologies. I really like the look of it. I like the fact that you can see at a glance as well what is happening as you move on when you fill it in. So it will give you, I think, a general overview of the research as it progresses. And I think I'd be tempted to include my and to link to my research questions as well, to see how they're fitted with those different iterations and different cycles.
Good point, Fiona. So you might have a research aim and some questions to start off with that you and your teachers want to investigate. Of course, those research questions or aims and objectives might shift a bit between cycle 1 and cycle 2.
Yes, and I think it'll help you see that shift as well.
Yeah.
But
there might be certain questions right from the beginning, right, well, we have to, in cycle 1, we'll look at this. And in cycle 2, we'll know we want to look at that. And then also shift it. So it's a bit of both. Anyone else want to come in with any sort of general comments? I'm not saying that this is your timetable or anything, there's a lot of work to put together, detailed timetable, but anyone else want to come in at this stage?
Yes, Kath, it's Lorna from Tameside College. I think we were actually perhaps sort of like thinking initially for next year that we would have maybe more than one action research project going on. And is this something that we would be doing for every question, or is this something we would do for the overall aim?
Yeah, right. Okay, so this year it is a bit different. Action research leads can run a single action research group or looking into a certain topic, quite a specific topic. And or an action research lead might have 2, possibly even more action research groups this year, looking at either related but distinctive or unrelated topics. Each cycle means biting off a little bit of what one action research group wants to look at and working through over the year your different aspects of the same topic, Lorna, if that makes sense. So you might start in half term 2, so between October and December, you might start being quite exploratory and just finding out where teachers are at or where students are at with something, or finding out their broad attitudes or something. Or you might pool ideas of what different teachers are currently doing, come up with what you think is the best there, and over a certain activity or how to teach a certain concept. And you will all have a go at that. So you've got some quick wins. And then you might review coming up to December. Okay, well, what did we get out of our first investigation? What do we know? What do we don't know that we now need to go and dig in a bit more detail and find out still about this same thing, but maybe your first efforts didn't work for certain students, or you need some complementary staff development to go with it, or you need, to improve it again. So it's about finding out what works in the most efficient manner, putting that straight into practice, and then moving on from that to see if you can refine that even more. You won't be able to investigate the entire topic, your entire aim in a single cycle. Lorna, does that help at all? It's a bit fuzzy.
It does, I think, Kath. Unfortunately, my internet connection is very, very jumpy at the moment. I don't quite know why, but it is. I'm plugged in and everything. I'm getting the impression here that we're actually going to be doing, in order for this to work sort of like most efficiently and to get the most out of it, to actually have a very, very narrow focus actually on action research. You're nodding. Very, very narrow.
Yeah.
And I think possibly we were envisaging it maybe being a little bit more wider than that. But it seems to me that we're going to have to be looking at virtually 1, possibly 2 very specific things, and everything has to follow that. Is that roughly right?
I think for any one cycle, you want to look at specific things, but you could look at you could do multiple cycles throughout the year, looking at different aspects of your overarching topic.
Okay. Would you suggest that we did these cycles in a linear manner, as opposed to having them all going off at the same time?
Oh, yeah, that's good, isn't it? Right. So you could take your whole action research group, be that 4 up to 12 people, through in linear manner, all doing the same. However, if 2 teachers get fired up about such and such, and another 3 teachers can buddy each other to go through, then you can start you know, not doing it just all linear. You could have two people, two groups spinning off, doing their own thing, coming back a fortnight later. I wouldn't leave it too long because things can drift, but, you know, coming back, maybe planning together. Oh, you know, we'll plan to do this, we'll plan to do that. Go and try it out in practice and come back together. How did it go?
Right.
So your choice as a group.
Okay.
Debs has said you need decent sized groups. Yes, now we've had this conversation, Debs, you need a group. You need a group, everybody. You cannot do one person doing this, okay? And those people need to know that they are doing some practitioner research, or you know, they are part of the action research group to do this. Yep. Decent sized groups, yeah, 4 to 12, please. And Vicky, I felt from this year it was one big cycle, and now I have ideas about this year based on last year. I'm worried there isn't time to start cycle 2 within the same year. Right, yes, okay. So we're talking about kind of how to break it up, or how to get the flow over the year. We have talked about an annual project in year 1 and year 2, and now we're wanting to make it more realistic, more sustainable, less, you know, giant projects that report just at the end of the year, maybe. Although there is a formal presentation and report of your learnings throughout the year at the end of next year. It's really more about this idea of at least a couple of action research cycles, and they are smaller, they're shorter in length. And then you learn what's come out of one, analyze the data, decide what it means, and then go into your next action research cycle. Some people will get in a third cycle, or some people will have little teams going off doing other cycles during this year. So yeah, I am absolutely here and dedicated to you guys to do your research designs with you. So the consultancy sessions you can have with me this year, and we're saying a minimum of 1 hour with me per term, minimum. Some people were taking 4 or 5 hours a term. That's absolutely fine, but a minimum 1 hour with me per term. And, you know, research design, how do you do this, Vicky? How do we plot it out? And what do we look at, Lorna, each time is very much, you know, my bag, and what I can help you with on a one-to-one or action research group kind of basis. Okay, there may be other questions in there, and we're going to pick up a lot of these issues as the day goes on as well, as our morning goes on. I'm just picking up Sam's comment. If we set people off to implement an action, when they return with pros and cons, do we ask them to write up with their findings and collate at the end as one big report? Right, we need a report at the end. We do. But we're not going to burden people with a report at the end of every cycle. The change in practice is much, much more important than the writing it up. But you need the evidence to show what's worked and what hasn't. So some evidence, some analysis, we got together and we discussed it, what changes we put in and what we've done and what's worked for us. It needs to be collated for the final write-up. Sans, hi.
Yeah, hi, Matt, how are you? All right. Just in relation to what I was just saying there about just trying to get a grasp of what you're saying is, if we're creating our little action research groups, sorry, you'll have to give me my throat so they do. If we're creating our action research groups, they're working within our sort of overarching question that we're working towards as a group, and they're going off individually and trying different little things that they would say, you know, we're going to try this and see this works, and then they'll come back with their findings, They'll use their findings to maybe steer their next cycle, you know, bouncing off each week, but then constantly keeping a report of how they got to there and what made their new decisions and so on, and building up. We should then be able to take each of those little paths from our groups as our, you know, which feeds our report at the end. So I think it was just going back to, I can't remember who it was who said it earlier, and sorry, I forgot your name, where internet was going. I think she was sort of looking at, it's not about filling out a one of these for every single cycle or for every single, it's just about maybe having one, which, you know, you have a break in between, do a reflection, use its guidance to then set you off for the next one, but a constant record where we can use that as evidence towards our overarching end report.
Yeah.
If that's me in my right direction in my head there, we have to start off at some point about training the teachers how to write a report, how to do action research. We can't just go, oh yes, I'd love to try this.
How to reflect.
Because they could just go off like what we did when we very first started, and we just collected this much data, and it was like huge. When, as we've gone over the 2 years, we've realized that we don't need to be focused out that far, and we've sort of honed in our skills. Are we talking about, because I took train to train today as being able to show me how I would train an actual teacher new to this, to not go off on tangents and to keep focused within their little, if they're picking one, you do 2 or 3 weeks of research, stay there. And it's that's what I want to try and get out of today, to be able to get people to focus in that need. I hope that's what
get them to bite off something that's manageable.
Yes, that's it. That's where, for me, if you were going to do these cycles that you've got here, which I think is fabulous, I love doing the research on that, but I think the cycle itself, the teachers have to be shown that instantly before we even run off and let them. It's got to be.
There's a method. It's systematic. It's not too much all at once, you know, and it's very much about what works in practice and making a change, an evidence-informed change to practice. The research is just the vehicle to making an improvement. From whatever start, you know, you've heard me say this before. Different teachers are at different starting points as well. Right, we're 5 minutes over time. I'm aware of that, just for that section. So if I haven't answered your question, or if you come back to me with more questions, I will mop those up. I will answer those, and my sincere apologies if I have missed something there.